Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you guys all for being with us today. This is our first session of our PMA Academy sessions in our global month, which is really exciting for us. It's really important to not only look at domestic, issues and trends, but to also look at different territories, what's happening in the rest of the world. Things are different there than they are here. So I think that's the goal this month, is to expand on territories and really get a feel for what's happening around the world in our business. So I'm not going to take up too much time because there's a lot to get to, but I just really briefly want to say thank you to our PMA Academy session sponsors, APM Music, the NMPA, AdRev, TuneSat, ASCAP, and BMI. And an especially big thanks to our presenting sponsor today, and that is West One Music Group. Thank you to West One for presenting this session. We're really looking forward to it. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator for today, Martin, and he will introduce the rest of the panelists or have them introduce themselves. And we will get going. Leave your questions in the chat box as always. We will get to them at the end or throughout, depending on the question and depending on the conversation. And I think that's it. So I'll turn it over to Martin now and let you guys go on ahead, and I will sign off.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. So first of all, thank you for having us and for having me for this panel. I'm Martin Nedvěd. I run a company called Studio Fontāna here in Central Europe, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and a couple more countries. And I also am lucky to run the production music committee of ICMP, which is the very smaller version and the European version of the PMA here on the other side of the ocean. And let us just introduce all of the panelists. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself, not to mess it up. So maybe if you can start with Juliette.
Hello, I'm Juliette Metz. I'm from Paris, in France. My company is called Encore, Merci. So I'm in this business for a long time, and I'm the chair of the French music publisher MPA in France.
Great. Who's next? Okay, Einar, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Einar Helde from APL Publishing, a Danish publishing company with an office in Munich, Germany, where we do sub-publishing. Yeah.
And also PMC member.
I'm also a PMC member.
Yeah.
He's too humble to mention that, and Juliette as well. So I'm going to go how the screens are lined up here on my screen. So Andreas, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Andreas Nielsen. I am from KODA, the Danish Performance Rights Society. I am responsible for our publishing members here at KODA. I actually used to work as a music publisher myself, so I've been in the publishing arena, you could say. And I guess I'm here representing the society side.
Great. Thank you. Horea?
Hi everyone, I'm Horea Pascu from Blue Island Music, Romania. Blue Island Music is a production music sub-publishing company and music supervision company based in Bucharest, Romania. It's a company I run. Then I'm also I've been a member of the production music committee in the ICMP, like Martin and I, and all my colleagues here. Yeah, that would be a very short introduction.
Thank you. And John, please.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Johnny Phelan. I'm the Director General at ICMP. That's the global trade body for the music publishing industry. We represent the majors and more than 1,000 independent music publishers, and also 54 different national industry associations across 4 continents, including our colleagues there in the US, the NMPA. And as Martin said, the PMC is run out of ICMP, if that's not too many letters to start off with. And we are basically, as a trade body, our job is to protect the rights and potential royalty streams of course, of music publishers, but including production music specialists as well. So that's our task and our focus.
Great. And let me just say that the ICMP has been a great help for us here at PMC. So thanks to all of the panelists for participating, and let's jump in. So we thought about how to structure this so that the topics really are the impact of COVID on the production music in Europe. And we thought about that the best way to structure it would be to divide it into sync first, then into the public performance, and then any other changes or changes in the market that we are seeing. So it will be divided into these three. And so let's start with the first one, with the impact on synchronization. And yeah, let's just start with. Well, does anyone wants to start to talk about their country?
Yeah, let's start. I'll do it.
Great.
Regarding France, I don't have numbers regarding the decrease in the sync rights. What I see is that during the lockdown, we had the lockdown during March and April, and it was very sudden. We just learned it a few days before. So as it was very sudden, companies were not prepared. So it was a mess. It was complicated because they stopped filming, they stopped post-producing. So it was difficult for us to contact the people we used to work with. So there was a drop on TV and on radio for advertising because most of the brands were not at ease with making promo of their products during the lockdown because it was not a good time for them. So I don't have figures, but I think that we can imagine that it might be a loss of 40 to 50% during the lockdown. And after that, it was better. The life was getting back to normal, the new normal, I would say. And now we can see that things are different. It's a very long process. We used to have deals signed quicker. Now it takes a lot of time. A lot of companies are saying that it's okay, the music is okay, they want to work with us, but we have to wait until next year because they don't have the budget or they want to be sure of what they will be doing next year. So it's very unsure. It's not very easy to work in this kind of environment. So yeah, it has a huge impact, but I think that sync being 20 to 25% of the total income that we have, it's not what's the most difficult for us. What we are afraid of is the difficulty of getting our rights paid, you know, because of the way the PRO the PRO is working and how they can deal with the fact that they have to work remotely, and it's more difficult to be efficient if they have to get rid of a part of their team. So that's more the problem for us.
Interesting. So in the countries that we run the sub-publishing, we really saw a huge downturn in the second quarter. So to the tune of sometimes 30 to 50%, definitely. But then the third quarter, after the lockdown here, we actually had very similar numbers to last year. So we didn't really make up for the lost income from the second quarter, but otherwise the numbers were very same to last year. So slightly positive. Is that something you guys are also seeing in your countries, or was that just a fluke here?
No, it's not getting back to what it used to be. It's not the same.
So in France, for example, for you or for the other publishers, it didn't, like, the numbers for third quarter didn't reach
no.
what they reached last year.
No.
And can you like Do you have any estimate, like how down is it compared to last year in percentage?
No, sorry, no, I don't want to give wrong figures.
Right. What about you, Einar or Horea?
No, I think, yeah.
Yeah, go on, Einar.
Yeah, I can start by talking about Germany, and we had a similar experience as Juliette. When the lockdown came, the productions dropped kind of immediately, and then there was a slow rise in new type of production. So smaller teams, different type of TV productions were starting to try to find creative solutions, like everyone using Zoom or filming stuff with their mobile cameras, or smaller teams. Of course, that didn't cover the drop we saw. And then we had kind of similar experience as you, Martin, in Q3. It was significantly better. Productions went up, bigger productions started catching up all the things that they were supposed to do in Q2. Not to the same numbers that we had last year, but Q3 was a lot better than Q2. And now we see a lot of big productions are still happening, and we're placing music there. I don't know if it's going to continue for the rest of the year, but I'm quite positive about what happened in Q3 in terms of what could be expected from Q2.
Okay, Horea, how was it in Romania?
Yeah, it looks like our experience is similar to yours, to Studio Fontāna. So we had quite a steep decline in the lockdown, starting with March. So we had like 45% decline in the sync revenue in March, and then minus 47% in April. But then May wasn't that bad. June was like minus 20%, but then July was even better than when the similar month in 2019, and then September was also even better. So overall Q3 was pretty strong again. I think overall it was even better than the last year's third quarter. So even though we had a very steep decline, like in half or almost, the recovery was also pretty steep. So like a V shape, which is kind of encouraging, but that's only synchronization revenue. So from advertising, of course, talking to people in TV stations in Romania, they all say they kind of have a big drop in the advertising revenue. So then, which translates into the performing and neighboring royalties distributions in the quarters to come.
We will still get to touch that. So that's
yeah,
the main topic, of course.
Yeah. Just for the thing that's quite hopeful for now.
And Andreas, I know that you don't deal directly with the synchronization at KODA, but you still talk to your publisher, so maybe you can share some things.
Yeah, I think how Einar described what's happening in Germany is very sort of parallel to what's happening and has happened in Denmark so far. As you could have predicted during lockdown, when everyone had to, self-isolate, all productions were halted, and that also meant that all sync sort of invoicing was halted. So basically, there was very little to no sync. If there was any sync during lockdown, it was left over from prior to lockdown. After lockdown, and we started opening up, the market started slowly opening up. Is what I was having talked to our members and publishers was told. One of the things that has happened is that you have the commercial TV channels that are sort of driven or run through commercials and advertising, and they were hit harder than the public service channels, which are run more or less through taxpayer money. And that means that the public service TV channels had more or less of a set budget already in place that they could work with. So they just had to find a way of working around the restrictions imposed by COVID. So you could say that it's been sort of a two-part market where definitely the commercially driven, advertising driven TV channels are more hit, and therefore sync has gone down, but you could say that the public service channels keeps it up a little bit.
Interesting. And to maybe slowly start wrapping up the sync, does any one of you, is anyone here willing to predict what will happen with sync now, going into the second wave that's now really going quite strong in Europe? So would any one of you be willing to predict what's going to happen?
Yeah, I can predict that if there's another lockdown, like in your territory, there will be less productions. The more worrying thing for me is, maybe I'm jumping ahead to the last point, but if they're cutting budgets and then moving over to cheaper solutions, cheaper licensing options when it comes to sync. We can see there's a lot of those subscription platforms that are offering very cheap music, and my worst worry is that this drop will move more people in that direction.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have exactly the same fear. I can see that the competition is fierce. It's even worse than it was before COVID. And we can see that, I cannot say that people are panicking, but yeah, there is pressure to have to sign deals, and I see that the prices are getting lower and lower on some kind of usages, and it's for me it's a bad thing. It's a bad idea, and yeah, I'm very afraid of the possibility that the client who are now looking for cheaper offers would get used to other solutions, and that would be difficult to change after the crisis.
Okay, I mean, for me, sync still seems to be going very similar to what it has been going to in the third quarter here in my territories, and that's that even though we already have a lockdown now in place starting today actually, or a couple of days ago, and that was expected for a couple of weeks. But this time in the lockdown, the productions can still continue. So they have an actually exception from the government. So they realize now that some things are not necessary for the lockdown to actually have effect. So I'm slightly more hopeful that it might decrease less than it has decreased during the last lockdown in March and April. But I still am expecting to actually have a decrease again. So yeah. So is there anything else that any one of the panelists would like to say regarding the sync?
I think if I may, Martin, just on sync, it's very hard for us as a trade body to get a complete picture in every country, but I think it's very important to bear in mind that in only 6 months things have gotten a lot better. I mean, there was essentially a total cancellation in and around April and May, an absolute collapse in many different revenue streams across sync, but across many different streams. And if we look at what Juliette mentioned in France, when she said that the projections of 40% losses, that's in and around 4.3 billion annually in France. So the numbers were really quite stark. But insofar as it's possible to say, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a hockey stick shaped rebound. It's not a dramatic recovery, but certainly in most countries in Q3, there seems to be an uplift again in sync and in many other usages, and that's to be welcome. I think a big part of that is, as was mentioned, governments are now stepping in to enable productions to continue. And I think that initial fright amongst a lot of producers about the simple inability to move productions on, that has passed, and people are finding ways to adapt. And we're hopeful that that recovery can continue to be encouraged. Bearing in mind, of course, there are many other territories around the world where there is no lockdown in place. And we only have to refer to Taiwan in Asia as one such example, which is completely different from what's happening in Europe at the moment. So it's fluctuating a lot, but we're hopeful of some resilience and continued recovery.
Yeah, great. I think we are also seeing that there's a huge demand for productions. So it's all the TVs and all the ad agencies, they do want to produce. So it's not. It's very different to previous, any economic crises or types of decreases that we could have seen in the past. That this was not on the supply side. On the demand side. Sorry, this was externality pretty much. This was so. hopefully, we will see more of the uplift and not another, V-shape going down. So let's move on to the second point, which is the I think for most of us the most important anyway, which is the public performance. So when talking about sync, of course, it's that's the money that we are seeing immediately, and that's how we can see that something is wrong very quickly. But at the end of the day, especially here in Europe, really all of the production music is reliable on public performance money. No matter if the company is large or small, if it's new or old. Of course, there are differences between countries. There are differences between companies. But still, in most European territories, performance income is by far the most important for any production music company. So, anyone wants to start what they have seen in their country to happen and what they are expecting?
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, go, Andreas.
Go ahead, Andreas.
Go ahead.
Well, I can talk a bit about what has happened in Denmark and the sort of the perspective of KODA as a performance rights society. So when lockdown started prior to the summer, we sat down and sort of looked at all our income streams and also looked at the different disruptions that COVID has brought upon us. And we have sort of updated that model along, but with all these predictions, it comes with a lot of, you could say, caveats that these are all our best estimates of what we think will ultimately be the result of this. But looking at it with those caveats in mind, of course, there are two sort of effects. There's the sort of restriction on public gathering, which affects concerts, movie theaters, and what we call background, but cafes and such. And then there's the disruption of the consumer market, which is basically that people couldn't go out to shops and buy cars, whatever. So it affected advertising, and that affected radio and TV, and again also some background music because stores are down. So those two factors are sort of the ones that affected us. And if we look on as a whole, we're sort of expecting COVID to impact us by about 16% down, of course, and that is mainly driven by sort of the consumer market, the way that's been hit, and especially with the radio and TV. Radio, I think we're going to see around 40% down, and then TV about 12% down. And those the reason why those are affected the way they are is because it's, as I mentioned before, we have this duality of we have commercial advertising driven TV and radio stations, and then we have the public service radio and TV stations. And in the radio space, it's mostly commercial advertising driven, and then the biggest income sources on the TV side is actually the public service ones for us. So that sort of dichotomy sort of means that radio goes down a lot more than TV for us.
Interesting. And can you tell us for example, what is the average for the commercial TVs? Because from what you're saying, I understand it that the public TV or the public TV is not financed on, it's not paying a license that's based on its revenue, but it's a blanket, right?
Exactly.
Which is the case in most countries, I would say, in Europe, while the commercial TVs usually pay a percentage of their ad revenue. And so could you give us maybe an estimate of what the commercial TVs, what their decrease is going to be, or what it is, what you're expecting?
Unfortunately, I only have the overall percentage going down, but what I can say is that you're absolutely right. And then I would add that the commercial TV stations and radio stations as such, it's a mix of factors that we sort of do these deals on. But absolutely, percentage of revenue is part of how we structure those sort of deals, and that is why they're hit. I think overall, I think we're gonna see some hit in the early beginnings of next year, because if you wanted to add to it, you could say that what has happened in a lot of different territories around the world is that societies have seen how musicians and publishers have been hit in ways that are outside of these societies revenue streams, such as sync or live performance for performing artists. So they've tried to push out distributions earlier, which basically means that you will have, when you push out things earlier, that means you affect the periods where there are normally disputes. So you will have a smaller Q4 than you would normally have probably. And you will also probably have a lot smaller Q1 and Q2 of next year. Further to that, you will also see that foreign distributions will have risen quite sharply for 2020. So it looked like 2020 was actually a really good year for foreign distribution for a lot of societies. But what is actually the case is that societies have pushed through distributions in order to sort of compensate. And that means that I think 2021 will look a lot worse than 2022 will. 2020 will look for a foreign perspective for all societies around the world. That's
quite scary when you say that 2021 is going to be worse than 2020. I don't think many people can. No, I totally understand what you mean. So who wants to follow up with their country?
Oh, I can follow up. My country is kind of Germany and Denmark because we're a Danish publisher. And the first thing we saw was that the performance societies, they were very, very like proactive and helpful. So GEMA gave out like huge aid packages. KODA offered also directly to publishers, like, let us know if you need help. But it was kind of up to us to say yes to it. And I think production music is getting away a lot better than bigger parts of the music industry. Because we're not reliant on live, we won't see an immediate drop, of course. And for established production music companies that has a lot of placements, the drop in production actually meant more reruns. So for them, they wouldn't be as hardly hit as hard as the younger companies who doesn't have that many productions. So kind of an advantage for the established players, I would say, over the next couple of years with the effect of it. I think I will just add to what Andreas said. It also depends on how much the drop in the income will be for the societies from TV in general. Radio is not that important for production music as the TV broadcast is.
Mm-hmm. Juliette, we wanted to continue with that.
Yes, regarding what SACEM has received, the public performance, the hotels, restaurants, stores, and live shows, the drop is 55%. So it's not very, very. The impact for production music is not very big because it's not our main market. On TV and radio, the loss is 10%. Because like Andreas said, on public TVs or radios, it's paid by the taxpayer, so it has the decrease of the ads are not concerned by that because it's taxpayer, so it's flat. And it's the one who paid the most, so that's okay with us. So that's 10% in decrease. We have the private copy. I don't know if everyone is aware of that. It's a tax that people pay when they buy a computer, an iPhone, DVD where they copy music. So private copy, the decrease is 24%. We have the online, which is plus 14, but it's not important for us because we are not really on Spotify or Tidal or whatever, so we don't care about that. And the right coming from international, it's 30% less. So in global, SACEM expect to lose 300 million euros between 2020 and 2021, which is around 25% of the total income. So that's a lot, but I guess that what I imagine, what I can see is we are the less impacted of the publishers because of our activity, so that's okay. I'm more concerned about the fact that the PROs will have difficulty in functioning because the operating cost that they have is taken on the global rights that they collect. So if the rights are going down, they will have less money to pay their people. At SACEM, there are 1,300 people. They are getting rid of 170. We don't know how they will be able to function correctly, knowing that a lot of them are working remotely and that they don't have, they are not all working. Some of them, they are on sick leave. Some of them are ill, so we don't know. So for me, it's a more difficult thing. The most difficult thing is to see how the PRO will be able to handle the crisis like any company has to do. So we'll see.
Can I ask you, when you said that there was a almost 30% decrease from abroad,
Yeah.
Was there any explanation with that? How do you explain that?
It's what they think will happen with the decrease of all the other PROs in all the other territories.
So that's an estimate. That's not now like what that it's not like that they already received 30% less money, but it's an estimate. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Because
and that's based on both this year and next year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good to know. Horea, do you want to continue with?
And if I can add something regarding the relief fund that they have for members, what I see is that in each territory, people, the government or the PRO, they are trying to help composers or publishers or labels, and it's good. We need that. We are thankful for that. But the thing is that it's very local, and it's a way to strengthen. I'm sorry, it's not very easy to say. To support the structure or the project that they have when they invest in a new album or something like that. But what is lost is lost. So it's not a compensation for the rights which are lost. So it's good locally to help composers or publishers, but it's not going abroad. You know, I'm not sending you, if you are a publisher I work with, I'm not sending you the relief fund I can have for my company, you know, so it's money that stays in each territory. So it's not going from one territory to another like the rights used to be. So yeah.
Right, it's non-distributable by you. Understood. Horea, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I could add a few things regarding my territory. So in Romania, when it all started, the PROs were quite supportive. For example, the Neighboring Rights Society moved their distribution the fourth quarter for 2019. They were supposed to distribute like in beginning of May. They moved it ahead, but like they weren't able to process the distribution, so they just paid advance money to their members based on their previous revenue. So it was just an estimation, and then when they later, like 3 months later, when they finished the actual distribution, they just paid the differences for each member. So that was quite yeah, they behaved quite supportive. And then the Copyright Society continued to work. I think most of their staff even worked from the office even during the lockdown. So they didn't seem to have any problems in their workflow. Unfortunately, I don't have any data with regards to they didn't provide us any estimates regarding the possible drops that they will be expecting. So we don't know such data. We only have know our own data for the second second quarter of this year distribution, which was not that bad. Like it was like a 15 to 20% drop, but that's not very concludent because it really depends on the actual activity on the catalog. So,
but did it already include any like license income from the March, April, or May? Or
yes,
June?
yes, it was the second quarter, so it was April to June, yeah. And
okay, so
yeah,
you mean but okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so we already received that, but that's that's the only figure that we know, because we don't know the global figures, whether their total revenues decreased, like what was the percentage of their decrease. So we can't really know just based on our, but our distribution was very like good enough, like surprisingly good given the circumstances. But this doesn't mean that it was a general, it was for the same for all the members. So what I could also add is, since I was 2 weeks ago, I was attending a music conference in Switzerland, in Zurich, like an actual conference with real people and in real life, which is
you might be the only person in this whole chat or in this whole Zoom that has actually physically been to a conference this year.
Well, no, my co-panelist Martin Hein from Switzerland is also here attending. So we are at least 2 persons who are in who attended a music conference.
And I was supposed to come, but I couldn't come because I was in a quarantine, because I was in a contact with someone that was actually COVID positive. So I couldn't come.
Unfortunately, we missed you.
Thank you.
So thanks to this participation, I know some data from Swissa, the Swiss Copyright Society, which they estimated a 25% overall drop for the revenues in 2020, but they split by sources for the public performance revenue coming from retailers, bars, restaurants, cinemas. They anticipated a drop of 57% this year, mainly due to the cancellation of major festivals, events, also due to the lockdown. So that's quite steep, actually. But that's mostly influences core music, the commercial music, as we all know. And then for the broadcasting rights for radio and TV stations, they foresee a drop of 11.5%. Which is also due to the reductions in advertising income for private radio and TV stations. Their mainly worry is about the public broadcaster in Switzerland, which pays a flat amount, a flat fee, a yearly flat fee to the performing society, and which they also. It's not yet known whether they would want to ask to negotiate for a decrease of the fee. So they will basically keep it flat, no matter their financial results. But it's very likely that they would ask a negotiation to bring it down, and they account for 25% of Swissa's revenue. So if they bring it down, it will kind of create some
overall decrease.
Yeah, some problem.
That would be. I think we can now move from the national level to more international level, and for that we can't have anyone better suited than John. So maybe John, if you want to share some of your numbers with us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Martin. Really, at ICMP, what we have been seeking to do over the last 6 months really are 3 things on behalf of our member companies and national groups. The first is that we've engaged in a society survey globally for all music usages to try and see what are the projected numbers for the next 6 to 12 months. And that's been the sort of the first major action that we've taken. We've had responses from 61 different countries around the world, and it fluctuates quite dramatically. We're seeing a lot of the similar types of figures as Juliette mentioned. In France, we're seeing between 18 to 35% across the sector is the kind of the range that we're seeing in terms of projected losses in collections from various societies. So between 18 and 35%, of course, is very, very, very significant. And we're seeing that breakdown in different ways. I'll come to that in a moment. The second main thing that we're doing is working with national governments and indeed the EU to make sure that there are mechanisms in place for small businesses, grants and loans. That's very important. What we've seen in Europe in the last month is really unprecedented. There's a 800 billion euro grant scheme which has now been approved by the European Council for the EU 27 member states. And that will be a mixture of grants and loans, and that will be available to small businesses across many different sectors, but of course, including music publishing companies. So the way that that 800 billion gets divested is essentially to the national governments, and then they are supposed to be in place for companies to apply to. And we're hoping that that will be something, a mechanism or a resource pool which will enable countries to, or companies, excuse me, to get really into 2021 and not suffer a worse fate. The third thing that we're doing really is liaising constantly with the other trade bodies across the industry as to what are the impacts for them. And of course, for commercial TV and public broadcasters, that's a very important area to see what are their projections for ad spend and revenue, etc. in the time to come. Perhaps we can just try here and share my screen. I'm always tempting fate here with these Zoom meetings, but I'll try and do so and show you some figures that we've gleaned from across the industry. Bear with me. So I'm just going to maximize this, and this is just a short excerpt from our MPA survey that I mentioned earlier. I hope you can see that. Large screen. Martin, I can only see.
We can see it. We are seeing the first screen now.
Ah, that's strange. Can you see the blue screen at all? No.
No.
No, we are still on the main one, the cover one.
Okay, it's saying the Zoom is quitting.
You have a
I think
connection.
I think John just left us.
No,
no, I don't see him here anymore.
He just dropped down on the rating.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay now, Martin?
Yes.
Sorry, this is always a tempting fate, but I'll just try that one more time.
No worries.
Bear with me.
It worked before, so it will work again.
So it'll work again. Hopefully you can see some numbers here. Can you see this?
We do.
Yes.
There we go. Technology, eh?
Yes.
So these, as I mentioned, these are really cross-sectoral. So these are some of the positive figures that we're seeing. For the music publishing industry, it's important to be medium and longer term. And what we're seeing across the industry is plus 6% by 2030 in compound annual growth rate. That's led for a number of reasons, not least of which is Article 17, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, and the new licensing environment that we're seeing in Europe. So as a broader industry over the medium and longer term, we're optimistic. But indeed, for the shorter term across the industry, some of the numbers are very stark indeed. Globally for 2020 and into the first half of 21, we're looking at least a conservative estimate of minus 25% across the music industry, as I say, into mid-2021. For the live sector, of course, has been essentially decimated in 2020. We're looking at minus 76%, labels hit for minus 8%, and publishing is down 5% for this year. But bear in mind, that is up from original projections of growth. So actually, we're still expecting a nominal growth rate in 2020 for the music publishing industry of about 3.5%. So I think really across the music industry, music publishing in general is better placed to weather the storm due to the diversification of the business models. And within music publishing, I would very much corroborate what Einar was saying also, that music production companies are pretty well placed to weather this storm also, given the fact that the impact that we're seeing, not just across broader sectors, but within the music industry itself, is really very, very stark. And we're seeing a lot of promoters, agencies, indeed artists themselves, very much struggling at the moment. So we're hopeful that production music will indeed be able to ride out the storm. And those are some of the initial figures. As I said, the society projections are just that at the moment, just projections, with swings between 18 to 35% in drops in collections until the next 6 months into 2021.
John, would I be right to say that the across the industry decline of 25 is heavily skewed by the live industry, right?
Yeah, indeed. It's heavily skewed by that. We're seeing in some countries, for example, in Japan now, attendance is up to 5,000 in a venue, as long as it's not exceeding 50% of the venue capacity. In Sweden, concerts are taking place. In Taiwan, Southeast Asia, many concerts are taking place. Just last Friday in London, even the Royal Opera House and Ballet is resuming. So incrementally, bit by bit, live is coming back, but indeed it is by far the hardest hit area of the industry for obvious reasons. All of the other negative impacts in terms of digital and streaming were rather short term as lockdowns hit, as people stayed at home, were watching news and Netflix, as we all were doing for a few days and weeks. But streaming is starting to rebound as well. So that's primarily live indeed.
Great. Thank you for this overview. That's of course interesting. I think for the production music, like it was said before, the most important by far is the broadcasting, and for that I'm it's something that I don't have an answer for myself, but I think the interesting question is gonna be, what is the ad spending gonna look like in a TV in the next year? Because we of course here all agree that the drop in performance is still in front of us. It's not behind us because of the delay between collecting the money and distributing it to us. So still the drop from 2020, if there is any, and there's very likely a drop in the broadcasting in most countries that we have now heard, probably between 10 and 30% we would estimate the drop in TV royalties to be, depending on the licensing schemes and just the different markets really. But I think the really big question is what is the ad spending going to look like in next year? Because like we discussed with the panelists before this panel started, it is my understanding that the big advertisers, the big ad spenders, usually buy the media in bulk. They budget for that before the year even starts. So in that sense, they couldn't really pull out of the TV when the COVID hit in 2020. They already bought the TV media, so they had to use it in 2020. But it's a question whether they're gonna spend as much on 2021, and these budgets are probably being like finalized, or they have been maybe even finalized by now. And since there's so much uncertainty, especially now in Europe with the second wave coming, it's a question whether we might actually see even a bigger drop of ad spending in the next year as opposed to this year. So I don't know if any of the panelists have anything to predict in that area.
If I can say something about that, I have no idea of what's going to be the ad spending, but what I see is that there is a lot of renewal of TV ads, because what you had in the previous world doesn't work now. People don't wear masks. The symbols are not the same. The message is not the same, and so I guess that a lot of brands will have to make new ads because they have to adapt. So that might be a good idea, a good thing for us. But I have no idea of how much they will spend. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, so that maybe we'll leave it just like an open-ended question, because that's definitely something that's worrying me even more than the decrease from this year, really. I'm worried what it might be, not only in 2021, but I actually think that we might even see a decrease in 2022, which I think would be really, really bad for the business, for the whole industry. I think we can move on to our last point of this discussion.
There's one question for John on the.
I did see that, and I wanted to leave it maybe for the end, so we can have a go. So I'm looking at the questions. So if you have any questions to our panelists, just write them into the chat, and we will try to answer them at the end. So the last really point in this discussion is, are you seeing any changes in the market? And if there are changes in your market, do you think they will stay after the pandemic is over? And of course, we are talking mainly about licensing and production music. I think we have covered a couple of those, but maybe you are seeing new things in your market that you didn't see so much before.
Yeah, I can start on this. If we keep it to licensing, there are some other interesting changes I've seen, but I think we see now how dependent we are, or we knew already, on the traditional broadcasters and the performance income from them. And I think there's a bigger move towards digital. I'm not saying that Netflix isn't already there, but like the VODs, the YouTube, the work we need to do there to increase their role in the back end through Article 17 and through negotiations with the big tech players, I think will be very important for our industry going forward. So we're not so dependent on those classic broadcasters who slowly are losing ground to the digital space. And I think both Andreas and Johnny has some interesting aspects on that.
Just so if I can just jump in like with technicality for our American audience, the Article 17 is a piece of legislation in the European Union, and it to summarize it in 10 seconds, it is something that's supposed to help the creative sector and the music sector when it comes to licensing by internet companies. So all of the YouTubes, Facebooks, and Googles of the world. So it's a very important legislation that is now, taking shape in EU, and there's a fight over what it's going to look like exactly. Yeah. And now to you, Andreas or Johnny.
I can say a little bit. I think with the Article 17 and then what basically one of the things it did was it removed the safe harbor provision, or it intends to do that once it's in legislation, and that just means that the user-generated content sites such as YouTube can no longer claim to not know that there's music on their sites, and that in itself means that we actually have a much better position when we start negotiating with them. I think what Einar says is very important, but I think it's my perspective on the whole COVID-19 situation is that it basically accelerated trends that we were already seeing. So a lot of the things that have happened, you can look at on a sort of very business specific, but also on a general sort of work perspective, is that it accelerated things that were already happening. We're already starting, at least in Denmark, and I think in many other countries, starting to look into how we can better work from home, how we can do better online meetings, and now we're doing this. And then what also happened was that it sort of pushed the consumer from watching sort of mostly what we would call flow TV, but TV, regular TV, to increasing consumption of online content. And that, of course, also means that it sort of pushes further underlines at least the need to have both good deals, but also sort of an ecosystem that can of course support music going forward without sort of having the incredible highs of once. So we don't look back on the incredible highs of TV and we're all feeling very poor once it's more or less an online market. So yeah, I actually agree that it's imperative, and what Einar exactly said is one of the many important pushes that have been sort of made in the right direction in order to actually to have that future, you could say. I think John also has a lot to add to this, I think.
Well, maybe just on your first point, Martin, you asked about broadcast. I think there's 3 stages to that. One is survival, first of all. In Europe, of course, it's just so incomparable to the American market, whereby by having simply 27 countries with so many commercial broadcasters and public broadcasters also, the initial phase we're in now, this first stage is survival for many production companies. And that second phase then is the licensing environment. What will be the direct impact upon the licensing valuation for music producers of all kinds? and that's very much in the speculative phase at the moment. We are not seeing an immediate impact, but of course we've talked already about some of the projections for next year. But the third aspect then is really looking to see whether the efficiencies as well too can take place within these companies, whether that's a good thing or not. You know, we do want to see a very diverse European broadcast marketplace. I think that's good for everyone. And so survival, licensing, and the sort of corollary effects on ad spend is really those three phases that we're still in phase one, I would say. So ad spend is very speculative at the moment. On the Article 17 aspect, Article 17 is really Europe's version, let's say, of the answer to the DMCA in the US, the Section 512, the infamous safe harbor. And Article 17 does three things. It says that the big platforms are liable, first of all, so they have to take a license. And then secondly, it says that if you don't have a license, that if any rights holder whatsoever involved in the music content notifies the platform, it not only must take it down, it must stay down. That's an extraordinary change. So it's not notice and take down, it's now notice and stay down, which gives leverage, of course, in the licensing environment. But thirdly, and I think even more interestingly, the Article 17 now obliges the big digital platforms to operate transparently to all rights holders to the highest industry standards. And that's really quite transformative when you think about how CMS and Facebook and TikTok, etc., operate currently. And having that transparency obligation really holds, I would argue, an even bigger benefit than the liability clarification. And what we're seeing in the US at the moment, we're working very closely, of course, with our colleagues at the NMPA and the RIAA to now get a version of this in the US and to clarify the safe harbor legislation there, something which the Copyright Office has already supported. And who knows in a few weeks' time post-election where we will be. But certainly the theme that we're hearing within the US government is now a willingness to address this issue. So I think it's when we look around the world in the very geopolitical sense, Europe, India, Southeast Asia, US, all of the big and emerging markets, clarification of liability, greater transparency is the trend that we're seeing. And I think that that's good news for the medium and longer term.
Great to hear that. Maybe maybe Johnny would want to expand on what Einar and Andreas was saying about the transition to digital, because I think that's something that's a really important aspect for all of us. Production music is so reliant on broadcasting, but I think we all feel that the transit to digital is just gonna probably speed up. It's not gonna slow down. So I know we have discussed this before with you, but maybe this is a good time to also touch on that. Yeah,
it's a very complex issue. It's very hard to give global norms, but certainly in general, we're seeing a migration away from broadcast towards digital in most markets. That is something which has been pretty constant over the last 10 years or so. The situation we're in now as the music publishing industry is that digital is bringing in about 52%, just over 52% of all global revenues is coming from digital. Germany and Japan are the only two markets who were primarily physical revenue markets until 2 years ago. So even those two outliers are now primarily digital markets. So the trend is pretty constant. The boost that we're hoping to see to that is, of course, to do with Article 17 and with the safe harbor aspect in the US, also in India, which is an extraordinary marketplace, 1.2 billion people, 400 million people under 26 years old, the lowest data rates in the world, everyone's got a mobile device. There are more than 25 different DSP services in India, but the licensing environment isn't correct there. So there's a huge amount of uplift to come in places like India. But also, again, I come back to the point about transparency. And, you know, there's a huge amount of music on these services, on many different services, which due to either buyouts or improper contracts, or on the technological side, the inaccurate or non-exhaustive recognition of the music on these platforms, people aren't getting paid. They aren't getting paid as much as they could be getting paid. And what we're trying to do is fix that, first on the licensing side, the liability side, but also on the content recognition side and the society side. And we're seeing huge advances in the last 10 years in terms of accuracy of recognition of content. And that is having positive effect across the board in every market in terms of lifting revenue. So I would say that we'll probably see a fairly drip, constant migration from broadcast to digital. I don't expect any kind of rapid or sudden change in that regard. There will always be a place for public service broadcasting in most markets, irrespective of how competitive commercial TV gets. But really where the big change will be, I think, is in terms of recognition, as I say, of music on these services, and better and improved technologies and licensing. And very simply, the improved bargaining position of all kinds of rights holders. Today, a rights holder, a single rights holder, will be able to go into YouTube and say, that is my content. Not only must you take a fair license for it, but also here are my obligations to you to be able to report back to me accurately, and so on and so on. And that's, I think that's a profound change.
Absolutely. So to wrap also this part of the discussion, and then we'll move to the questions. I think there is one thing that we have been trying to send as a message from PMC towards the PMA and to all our American partners, and that is the question of broadcast mechanicals. And for those of you who have heard it for the first time now, so it's the part of the license, or actually I'll start differently. When a show is aired in Europe on a TV, in most countries, the society will not only pay a performance, but they will also pay a mechanical. And the reasoning being that there is a copy of the recording, or copy of the work, copy of the work being used for that broadcast. And that is even more true in the digital space. So when we talk about the transition to the digital, to VOD services, to Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, all of those services, when they are being aired in Europe, the deals with most societies is that they are not only paying for public performance of that musical work, but they are also paying for a mechanical. And it's probably not technically a broadcast mechanical when it's in the online setting, but for just ease of understanding, we will still call it the broadcast mechanical. And now what the issue is that over the years, we are seeing that a lot of the productions coming, or most of the productions that are coming from the US, have this broadcast mechanical bought out at source. So it's being licensed away 100% buyout in the US, because it is not a valuable right in the US, because as far as I understand it, I might be wrong, but as far as I understand it, this right is not licensed or not collected by the societies in the US. And therefore, when a US publisher licenses this, they are actually not losing any money, because they will not probably get anything for when it's being aired anyway. But we are losing money on that as the sub-publishers of those works here in Europe, and thus you as the original publishers are losing money, because we don't have a share to send you on that. And moreover, I think it's teaching those productions the wrong lesson, that they don't have to pay for these rights. And I mean, it's an issue both in the broadcasting landscape, but I think it's even more issue that this is now starting to happen also in the digital. So this is really something that we would like to try to change, and we are now seeing that it is possible. So I have just actually heard in the last month from a fairly large production music company that has been able to license a pretty big deal with a VOD service, and they did fight for this broadcast mechanical, and they did get it into the licensing, into the boarding of the license. So it's not that this is immutable. This is not something that will necessarily mean that there will be no deal. So I think this is something that we need to, of course, discuss more, and it's something to be discussed between the PMA and PMC, and it has been. So don't get me wrong, we have been talking about this for a number of years now. But I just think that this is the right opportunity to also say that to like all of you who might have not been involved with that. And I don't know if any of the panelists would like to comment on that, or if they have anything to add.
I can add that I think, thanks for informing about this, Martin, because I think that's the whole clue, that a lot of people are not aware that this exists, and doing buyouts is a very easy solution. And maybe even the production companies that you're doing a buyout for, the broadcasters, do it for simplicity more than actually saving the money. So being aware of what rights you have. In Europe, you can ask us through the PMA or whatever, but being aware of what rights you're signing away in this kind of deals is very important, because at the end of the day, it's money lost for the whole industry. So please spread the word.
And we will definitely spread the word in any venue that we will be invited to. So I think we can now move to the questions. And so far, I only see one question, if I'm not mistaken, from Alan Lazar to John. Johnny, how does ICMP see revenue from digital / streaming growing over next decade as percentage of overall? Is that something you can actually talk about?
Yes, I mean, obviously the individual deals of our member companies are, of course, commercially sensitive. We don't comment on that. We do have global figures in terms of how fully licensed DSPs, as distinct from user uploaded content platforms, we would put in that bucket: YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Snap, etc. So those are the two different types. You've got the fully licensed services like Spotify, Deezer, etc., and then the user uploaded content ones. And I think, you know, the bottom line is digital is growing not only as a percentage of consumption and usage, but it's also growing in terms of valuation. That's pretty clear. We're hopeful now that as of 2021, whenever Article 17, which is still only at European level, when it gets into national level, that will really help set a new pattern for positive deals in Europe for the next 10, 12 years. We have seen very severe pressure by YouTube in Europe to devalue the digital licensing deals, not least of which in Denmark, of course, Andreas and his colleagues at KODA have been doing a fantastic job there resisting that pressure. And we're seeing YouTube and these kinds of big platforms in an environment they're not used to, and which is now being faced with having to take full and fair licenses. And I think we'll really start to see the benefits of that coming in from next year. On the buyouts aspect as well too, I think this is, I mean, it's a classic known unknown in terms of royalties. It's not wrong to do a buyout, and it's not improper, but it is wrong to not be aware of the rights and potential royalty streams that you could have. And I think that defending those is absolutely crucial. These market players have such power and such commercial leverage that it's even more important than ever to be aware of the rights that you have. You know, prevention is always better than cure. And whilst we welcome what the US is doing with the Department of Justice antitrust investigations into these big platforms, what the EU is doing, what Canada is seeking to do, that's cure, and we prefer prevention. And it's just really, really important that people see the globalized market for what it is. You know, make sure that you are aware of all these potential royalty streams. On the digital side, as I said, 52% currently, and we expect that to grow. Those are some of the top headline figures.
Can I jump in and add to that question from Alan? I know Alan has made some great shows for Netflix, for example, and I think the figure you're mentioning, Johnny, about 52%, a big chunk of that is Spotify, Deezer, these kind of DSPs. How do you have any idea about the figures from video, which actually concerns more the production music industry? So like the Netflix and the Hulu and that kind of digital income.
Yes, we're looking to always to break that down. We don't have a breakdown between a global breakdown between pure audio AOD, pure VOD, and then distinct Hulu from, say, for example, Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. We don't have that level of breakdown. But what we're looking at primarily is the difference between the demographics. So for example, if you look at YouTube, you've got 1.2 billion monthly users. You know, if you look at Spotify, they're recently celebrating 150 million paying subscribers. So there's, you know, two sides to this value gap. One is the licensing valuation, and the other is usage. You know, everyone's moving to YouTube. You know, if you look at India, if you look at Latin America, that's how kids these days as well too are consuming their music as well. So it's I would suggest it's not just about the business model, but the particular platforms. If we can solve Facebook and YouTube and these large platforms I understand that this may not be the #1 burning issue for production music companies just now, but I think if it can be solved, it will lead to a lot of benefits and growth.
I agree, but at the same time, I do agree with Einar that these, you know, like when we are looking at the impressive growth of digital and streaming, it can be quite often lost that most of it doesn't apply to production music, just simply because of the nature of what we are doing. So it's like, even if you look at you know, growth in digital of your performing rights society, that still doesn't tell you anything about if there's going to be any growth for you particularly, because I mean, when it comes to my society, they have a very strong growth when it comes to the digital, but it's mostly coming from streaming. And then there is a little bit coming from YouTube and a little bit from Facebook, with Facebook not applying to us at all because it's a totally different scheme. But the Netflixes and all of those other VODs is just very tiny. In case of Czech Republic, it's probably maybe 3 to 4% of what the broadcasting is doing. So it doesn't at all translate to what is the actual reality, that maybe now, you know, 20% of people or maybe even more have these services as their main, you know, source of audiovisual content. So it hasn't really translated yet into the same revenue. And I think we might be nearing the highest point of how much we can get royalties, how many royalties we can get from the TVs, but and there might be a decline after that. And it's a question whether the increase in those digital services in the VODs will be able to offset that here in Europe. So I think that's why we really need to talk about it a lot, and that should be maybe the main topic for you know, next couple of years, hopefully after COVID.
No, absolutely. Sorry.
No, sorry, if you wanted to add something to that.
No, it's just absolutely, instead of you know, dealing with large legislative questions, the contractual side and knowing what you're signing away, of course, for these particular digital services for production music is the #1 issue.
Great. So good thing that we agree here as the panelists from Europe, and let's now get someone from the US to agree with us as well on this, and let's try to get this somewhere as well. We have one more question, but unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to answer that, because that question is regarding US PRO's loss projections, and I don't know if there's anyone on this panel who knows numbers for US PROs. No. So I think you'll have to wait when the global month is over at PMA and wait for the US month or the rest of the 11 months of US, and hopefully that will be covered and might have been already covered before. So if there's nothing more in the questions, then I would like to thank you all as the audience, and especially all of the panelists for participating, and hopefully we will meet in physical sometime soon. Not too soon though, but hopefully next year. And thanks a lot to Morgan for organizing it, and for PMA for inviting us.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Morgan and Martin.
Thank you guys so much, guys and girl. We appreciate y'all. All of great info, great insight, great details across the board. Thank you very much. I want to just briefly thank again our sponsors, our presenting sponsor today, West One Music Group. Thank you so much for putting this panel on for us. And our PMA Academy session sponsors with APM, NMPA, AdRev, TuneSet, ASCAP, and BMI. Thank you to our session sponsors as well. Continuing our global month, we will be looking at Australia and New Zealand next week. So Australia and New Zealand are the territories we're looking at next week. Tuesday, I believe that one is a 3 p.m. Pacific time start, so a different time again, but we're accommodating our Australian friends and family over there. So 3 p.m. Pacific time start. We will see you there, and thank you guys again so much. It was great. Thank you.